Fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We'll talk more soon.
I'm gonna put on the positive side, right? Focus, take whatever it is you're making right now, and I'm telling you, we will see a completely different world, all right? Fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We'll talk more soon.
This is really doesn't affect your dinner.
Come on, somebody. Come on, so we're going to do really confident that we already know.
I can do some things to supplement what the education system is not providing.
Teammates, first and foremost, if this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Great to have you. To my regular listeners, as you already know, I get right into it, right to the point. And I am recording this. It is February 4th, 2024, 2424. And we are 3 days away, officially 72 hours away from what has become known, nationally known as National Signing Day, or widely known, I should say, as National Signing Day, in which there are tons of high school, in particular, more often than not, it's football players, it's the football world that knows about this specific day because it's dominated by football, and and it is going to be nationally televised, in which there's going to be the top recruits who haven't committed, top high school recruits who haven't committed to a college. Today is the day in which they have to sign that, not today, but this Wednesday, February 7th, is going to be the day in which they have to sign what they call a national letter of intent to play for a university. So no more jerking universities around, no more, committing and decommitting or whatever it is they do nowadays. It's like, look, this is when these major high school recruits it's time for you to pick a school. And today we're going to dive into why this day, why we've got to, well, first of all, how this day became such a huge event, how it's become so nationally televised. You gotta understand, I'm old school, man. I graduated in 2007, and it was not what it is today. I remember actually the first time that I even witnessed a National Signing Day. No one in the school knew about it. It was like in the guidance counselor's office I went to Good Counsel High School in Albany, Maryland. At the time, it was in Wheaton, Maryland. And I remember it was like my sophomore year where they even made a big deal out of it because we had one guy going to the University of Maine. He was a running back, and they did something very small. They took a couple pictures and they put it in the school newspaper, and that was that. It was not a big deal whatsoever. And now this is something that's being broadcast by ESPN. It's been a huge, major event for years, and people are, families are coming, entire schools are being shut down for the day because ESPN's there, and they're having huge assemblies to see what player is going to sign where and where they're going to sign. Live interviews. It's turned into an absolute circus, all right. And in my opinion, the reason for that, the reason that this day has turned into such a circus, is because of how much hype is being put into the NFL draft. To me, if you're a regular listener to my work, you've heard me say this over and over again. I'm going to continue to say it, that the NFL needs to do away with the draft and go to a feeder system because of this kind of bullshit, because of a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking to you today about. The hype that the National Football League puts behind this NFL draft, and how much of a circus and how much of an event that we've made the NFL draft. This is a ripple effect. The ripple effect is now there's this wide consideration. There's kind of this false belief that National Signing Day, when it comes to high school kids going to a college, represents them basically going to the NFL. So now there's kind of this huge event that ESPN has created when it comes to National Signing Day, and they make it such a huge deal when a high school football player commits to a certain college. They've made it into such a huge deal, and there's so many issues that come with that mindset. And we're gonna dive into all of them, right? But first, let me just break down everything first of all, break down everything that happens when you do this, when you make it an event, when you turn it into something that is just unnecessary. When you turn a kid signing to a college, all right, when you make it more specifically, a kid who's signing on to play football at a college. All right, we're not recognizing the kid who wants to go to school and be pre-med or pre-law, or go do some engineering work, go do some work that's actually going to study something that's actually going to save lives, and have tuition, is going to be in debt with school student loans and all. Like, these kids that are going to school to go to actual school and learn things. No, we're emphasizing, what we're doing is we're emphasizing the kid who's going to school and picking a football program, picking a football program so he can go play football, because there's the potential of him, eventually making millions and millions of dollars as a professional athlete. That's the kind of message that we're sending. We're basically saying that our professional athletes are more potential, but not all of them are going to be, only 1% is going to be a professional athlete. But we're saying the idea and the possibility of this kid becoming a professional athlete is more important than the kid who's going to this school to be pre-med, become a doctor and help cure cancers and help, and help with law, be pre-law, and help create laws and create practices that are going to make this world a better place, and initiate policies and stuff like that. That's what we're doing. All right. But if I get started on that, I'm going to definitely go off script today. But anyway, here's what this does. Here's what National Signing Day does. And they call it National Signing Day. They make it into, like I've mentioned, they make it into a huge event. The anxiety that it creates within a football player, within the high school player, to be more specific, excuse me, the anxiety it creates within the high school football player, the problems that it creates within the college player. I'm talking about the player that picked the school and doesn't really want to be there, isn't feeling it his freshman year, but there was this pressure for him to sign to this school by this specific date. The issues that a lot of those kids end up having, we're going to dive into that in a second. And also the egos and the issues and the anxiety that it creates within the actual high school coach to keep coaching, because now you're basing your success on how many kids you can get into college, or how many kids you said you got into college. You can say you got into college because now you're competing with other high school coaches, or who has these amount of kids playing in college. So now I'm going to tell this parent, hey, I got so and so signed to this school, so you need to come and bring your son to me, and all that kind of stuff, right? So all of this stuff creates such an absolute, just a terrible, terrible ripple effect when it comes to what this game needs to be about. When it comes to the kids just enjoying high school football, enjoying playing for the community, it creates so many problems, and we're going to break them all down. First of all, I'll start with myself. We'll start with the pressure that it puts on the high school athlete, the high school football player, to sign at a certain date. And this, I don't need to look any further than myself for to give you an example for this one. All right. And I listen, this is why I'm one of the experts when it comes to this business, why I'm one of the experts when it comes to where a kid should be going to college, or when it comes to high school football, high school sports recruiting. This is why I consider myself one of the experts, because I was all in this world. I was all in this world. All right. The school that I chose to go to this school because of football. All right. So all the anxiety and all the things that a high school kid, maybe a junior or senior in high school, is thinking about when it comes to playing football at the next level, I was thinking like that when I was 12 years old, going into high school. Was thinking like, I got to pick a school because this school has the best football program, and I'm going to play for this legendary coach, Coach Bob Malloy, who actually currently is the head coach from Maryland, or the head coach who has the most wins of any high school coach in Maryland, right? So I was all football all the time, just thinking about, just walked around with a ton of anxiety and wanting to just be the best, wanted to play Division I football. I was just that kind of kid, right? So when it got to my senior year, I played one position. My cumulative GPA was at a 2.2, and I was not. Like I said, I played one position. I was not, and in that one position, I was small for that one. I played linebacker, and I was a small linebacker. I was not like 220, 6'2", 220, and could run like the wind. No, I was 205, 5'11", 205, and slow. All right. I was good at one position. So I was honestly fooling myself thinking that I was gonna go play Division I football, at least out of high school. I really was. I was fooling myself. I know I had a lot of work ethic. I would bust my ass. I would go out and run every single night. I would do my wind sprints. I mean, I did everything in my power to get better athletically, but at the end of the day, I just wasn't natural. I wasn't a naturally gifted athlete, which is what it takes to play at the Division I level, right? So when it got to my senior year, I put in so much work that I wanted to play in college. I wanted to play in college. I needed to play in college to validate all of the work that I put in, and I wanted to sit at the signing day table with my guys, with the guys that for the past 3 or 4 years, I was going to war with them, man. I'm working out with them. I'm doing everything. I'm keeping up with them. I was not going to be satisfied if I didn't sit at that signing day table. All right. And you got to understand, I saw the event grow into something huge within the 4 years in which I was there. My freshman year, they didn't even have a signing day. The big time recruit that we had that year, his name was Eric Carter, and he ended up playing at Georgetown. And the only reason I knew he was going to Georgetown because I asked him directly, but they didn't have an actual event to say, yo, Eric Carr's playing at Georgetown. There was then the next year, there was like a little picture with Jerron about the fact that he signed at Maine, but Maine, that wasn't the only player that played somewhere that year. He also had a guy named Greg Lagon who played at Delaware State, and our quarterback, Reg, I believe, he played at Salisbury. And these were things that happened. These were deals they committed or they found their schools way after signing day. It was closer to March and April where they figured out where it is they were going to go. So there was no real pressure to sit at this signing day table. It was kind of confusing because nobody knew where they were going unless you asked them directly. Then the next year came, my junior year, when we had some major recruits. All right, we had Akeem Hebron, the late Akeem Hebron, who committed to Georgia. We had Anthony Davis, who was going to the University of Connecticut, UConn Huskies. We had Drew Glossler, who was going to the University of Maryland, and we had Tyrell Jones, who was going to the University of Maine. This is all Division I programs I'm naming here, by the way. And then also the kicker ended up going to the University of Maine, and then we had another linebacker. He was actually a long snapper who ended up going to the University of Villanova. That's 6 guys sitting, like 6 Division I players from one class, which is a lot. And this is when they actually had an event, Edgar Council. This was the first time they actually had an event where the entire school showed up and it's like, yeah, we're recognizing some of our athletes, some of our football players that are going on and playing football. And the guys that I just mentioned, the 6 players that I mentioned, were all at the signing day table. The whole thing was set up. And this was a year before my senior year. So you got to understand, it lit a motherfucking fire under me to say, all right, 1 year, I'm going to be sitting at that table. 1 year, I will be sitting at that table because, again, football is all I had. It was my identity at the school. So I was determined to, no matter what, I need to be sitting at that signing day table. That was where my mindset was. So as my senior year was winding down, again, the football season had ended and I had to deal with the reality of, look, the Division I just is not going to happen. Division I is just not going to happen. You're going to have to start looking at Division II and maybe some Division III. And then the difficult part about that is the fact that my grades weren't that great. So I knew my options were very limited. All right. In my defense, I knew my options were very limited. So the partial scholarship that I did end up receiving, which was from Carson Newman College, which is a Division II program in East Jefferson City, Tennessee. All right. This is Division II. So there was no real pressure for me to tell them or to commit to them or to say I was going to this school by the first Wednesday in February, which is what the day, National Signing Day, always falls on the first Wednesday. It always falls on the first Wednesday in February, which, and ironically, in 2007 was actually February 7th. So I had known that because I was talking to other guys, talking to other teammates who were getting Division I offers and all that kind of stuff. And I said, all right, so February 7th, I need to pick a school, right? And it was, I'm telling you the truth, all right? It wasn't until maybe that Monday, and that I had this offer on the table. I had some D3s, but the best offer in terms of, the high school kid mindset was this Division II program. Excuse me, was this Division II program named Carson Newman College. That was, in my mind, the best offer, not because of anything academically, all because of football, all because, it was the highest level in the football field that was interested in me or whatever. And they gave me a partial scholarship. So 2 days before signing day, the dream school that I wanted to have, which was Hofstra or Stony Brook, which I ended up actually transferring to Stony Brook, and I document, I tell all of this. By the way, I tell this entire story in a book titled Transferring D1. I get into details about how I went from a D2 to a D1 and how to navigate the transfer portal and all that. Make sure, if you haven't ordered your copy, make sure you order a copy on D1transfer.com. Also, join me every Sunday for the live streams in which we break all of this NIL and transfer portal stuff down and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but anyway, it's this Division II program in Jefferson City, Tennessee, named Carson Newman College. All right, so it's like maybe 48 hours, I believe, yeah, like 72. So it was the weekend. I think it was the weekend, and I know we had a snow day before. I think we had a snow day that Wednesday. Yeah, I remember it was signing day. So what happened was, it was like, I believe Monday. It was like Monday, in which I never even took a visit to Carson Newman. I never went there. I didn't know the area, anything like that. The only thing I knew is that they were interested in me and they actually sent an offer. And it was a couple of days away from National Signing Day. And I had what I saw a year ago with my former teammates and how everyone was sitting at the table and, signing to a college and all that. So without actually having gone to the school, I just decided to commit to Carson Newman. I'm going there. I'm going there. I remember telling my Coach McFadden, because again, the Division I programs were just not feeling me, which again, at this age, I'm now 35 and I understand why. But the Division I programs wasn't going to happen. And I said, all right, look, you know what? I'm going D2. I'm just going to go to Carson Newman and end this entire search, because I need to have somewhere in my mind. Again, this was what was going on in my mind. This isn't what actually it didn't have to happen this way. But again, in my mind, as a high school kid that needed his ego stroked a little bit and need to make sure he was already, that he was signed, and there was proof that he was signing at that signing day table with his teammates. I said, look, I'm giving myself this and I'm going to Carson Newman. So I committed to Carson Newman without having gone there, and I sat at the signing day table with my guys. It was and even though it was not the best way to pick a college, even though I didn't even get accepted into the school until a couple weeks later, until I actually took a visit there, and we did the whole thing and all that. So we talked to the admissions people and made sure I got accepted into the school and all that kind of stuff. So even though all that was a mistake, I think I probably would do it again. To be 100% honest with you, I probably would do it again, even knowing what I know, because it's a very special place. And the work I do now, the helping and the mentoring of young high school, college athletes, I'm not sure if I'd have the ability to be able to help kids through this process if I didn't make such a huge mistake. If I didn't just decide that I'm just going to go to a school without committing, without doing my research, without meeting the coaches, without going and figuring out if they have a major that's for me or if it's something I'll be able to study. None of that. I just knew that I was going to be a member of the football team, and they were ready to offer me, or they were ready to go right then and there. All right, something I get to use myself as an example of what not to do for a lot of high school football players that, especially this time of year, is just really confused about where they should go. Because again, you have all this press, you have all this going on with signing day, you have everything going on. You just don't know what you don't know. All right. So again, as crazy as the decision was, as crazy as it may sound to some people, I am very thankful at the fact that I made that decision. All right. So that's That's what it does. I'm living proof example. That's what all of this National Signing Day stuff does to the actual high school football player. All right, that's number one. Now let's get into the actual college football players and the mistakes that they actually have to live with. All right, the mistakes they actually have to live with. Now, with me, again, personally, I was a Division II, Division III talented guy. I was at the level that I needed to be at on the playing field. When I got to Carson Newman down, there were some players who were SEC talented type of a guys. There was one, I remember there was one running back. I believe his name was Chris Shiver something. Chris Shiver, I think it's Decker or something like that. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But I remember I met him when I got to Carson Newman. And, like all of us as freshmen, or not just Carson Newman, but what I learned is like pretty much all freshmen of college football, every college football freshman goes into that school and it's not what they thought it was, and everybody wants to transfer. Everybody wants to transfer. Don't nobody like it. It's not as great as they made it seem. I actually remember talking to another teammate of mine when I got to Stony Brook, and he was saying that, look, all that, how nice the campus looks and how cool the uniforms are and everything they show you on the recruiting visit, all of that stuff lasts for a day. It lasts literally for one day. The minute they blow the whistle for that first workout, all that shit goes away. It's work now. It's work. It's getting real now. So I remember I was talking to a Chris Shiverdecker, and he was a running back, and I believe he was one of the top. He had to be one of like the top recruits coming out of Tennessee, and he didn't. The thing is, I don't think he had the grades. I think the only thing that stopped him from being like at a SEC school or ACC school or one of the bigger schools out there was the fact that he wasn't eligible academically or something like that. And I remember chatting with him, because everybody at this stage of the game, everybody at Carson Newman, all the freshmen were already talking about transferring, where they're gonna go next year, and nobody wanted to stay, all that kind of stuff. Like for the longest, even myself, I tried to stay away from that talk. I tried to stay away from talking about transferring, because this was the school. This was a school that took water out of my eye. I was hurt at the fact that I couldn't go D1 out of high school, and I appreciated the school. I wanted it to work out at this school because they took linebackers who were my size, and I want to see things work out the same way they worked out at Good Counsel for me. So I tried my best not to get into the transfer talks and all that, but at the end of the day, Carson Newman was a second chance school. Had I done my research the right way, I would have found the right D2 Division III program, but I didn't. I chose a D2 program that was a second chance school where a lot of the big time players who messed up at big time schools, they would all come to Carson Newman. And Coach Sparks, the late Coach Sparks, being the Christian man that he is, he was always giving second chances to guys that messed up at other schools, and that just wasn't me. So it just wasn't a good fit on the football field when it comes to the kind of culture that he built. It wasn't a good fit. And again, had I done my research out of high school, then I would have known that. But anyway, that's another topic. Again, I cover all of that in Transferring D1, so make sure you get a copy, right? So anyway, I was chatting with Chris Shiverdecker, and he, as we're talking about what schools we're going to go to or where we're thinking about transferring and all that, he tells me that he's thinking. I asked him, where he's thinking about transferring. He goes, either Kentucky or LSU. I'm like, what? I said, say what? I said, yeah, Kentucky, LSU. Like, all right, so if you're not a football person, understand Kentucky and LSU, these are SEC schools. These are, Southern Eastern Conference. This is the top conference in college football. This is the power for this basically the NFL. Like, what are you talking about, man? You're in a Division II school and you talk about going to Kentucky or LSU. And, the more he broke it down to me, is like, yeah, I probably could have been there now had I chosen to go to a junior college. But I thought by signing day, I had to be here. And the fact that I'd signed at a Division II program, this is, years before the transfer portal was created. The fact that I signed a Division II program, I might have to sit out a year and all that kind of stuff. So again, you had a Division I, Power 5, Division I talented type of a guy who's at a Division II program because there was this, okay, by signing day I got to be here, or there was kind of this assumption. I'll say I highly doubt that Coach Sparks, would do anything ungodly or lead him on in any way that made him feel like he had to sign right then and there. But the end of the day, it could have just been some miscommunication with him to say, look, you have to be at this D2, as opposed to him going to a JUCO, doing his thing, and then simply transferring to one of these Power Five, one of these SEC schools. Again, he may just not have known that. But again, what we see on TV as kids, it starts to affect us because we're thinking, okay, National Signing Day is by this day, and he could have easily just got it confused that he needed to be at this school. And just talking to him, actually, I remember getting that feeling like, oh man, I just felt like I had to be there because of signing day and all that kind of stuff. So that's what it like how it actually ruined some careers, and now we'll never know. We have a talented guy who could have been playing at SEC schools, now the Division II school, and it just stuff isn't working out the right way and all that kind of stuff, and that's what it creates in that transition. So there's a lot of guys a lot of great players, a lot of people that could have been in really, really great situations had we figured out, and had we not been blasting this recruiting information and made it such a circus, there could be situations in which or high school football players, high school seniors more specifically, are taking their time. They're taking their time doing exact opposite of what I was doing, right? Taking your time, figuring out what school is the best fit, where it is you want to be, and somewhere you really feel at home. All right. So that's what it does to the kids. Now, I'll close you out with what I've seen since then. I've coached high school for 2 years. I've been a college scout, and I've coached high school football for 2 seasons. And I've, worked camps, and have, this, not only this podcast, but the books I have, and I teach now, and moved to Florida, done tons. I mean, just been all up in the football recruiting world, to where if you keep up with my work regularly, if you just look me up, you'll probably see a ton of information about me being at games and all that, just tons of stuff, right? So when I coached high school, I coached underneath the head coach of the high school that I coached at Maryland. He was a guy. He was a great. First of all, he's a great coach. I mean, not taking anything away from his mission, and not taking anything away from what exactly he does with the kids, more in particularly the young Black kids. I was just a fan of how he uses the game to mold men, and how he uses the game to teach young Black men how to become, how to go from boys to men. I did truly appreciate, because again, I was one of the young assistants, and even though he was talking to high school kids, I myself found myself kind of in their shoes, taking advice and learning things from him and things of that nature, right? So one of the things that even he would admit was a difficult task was the transition from high school to college, and figuring out who is how much should I put into helping kids get recruited? How much should I dive into this mess of recruiting and this transition that they're going to go through when they leave from high school, as a high school senior going to college? How much should I basically help them out? Because he was a coach that had a ton of college connections, knew a ton of college coaches. I believe he played at Norfolk, and he had a couple tryouts in the NFL, and he knew a couple guys up top in the NFL and all that kind of stuff. And I remember, actually, you can kind of feel it as he was talking, as we as coaches would talk, that it's difficult, especially as the kind of the young Black coach, to keep the interest of the guys if you don't have those connections, as opposed to being at a good counsel, being a Bob Malloy, being at DeMatha, being a Bill McGregor, and they got just a network, an actually network of college coaches, and that draws in a lot of the young Black kids and their families to this white coach, this older white coach that's been doing it for years, and it's been confirmed that they know a lot of college coaches. How much do you actually have to sell the fact that a ton of college coaches being a Black coach? All those things actually happen. It's not something that you just see on TV. It's actual real things that go on. So what starts to happen in situations like that is there's this push that a high school coach has to there's a push or there's a sense of urgency within a high school coach in which they feel like they got to get kids signed to a school. Doesn't matter where it is, especially of the black ones. Again, I was coached by one of the coaches that were on at Good Counsel staff, Coach McFadden. He had this same mentality. He was the one calling coaches on our behalf on the phone, visiting with college coaches. He was there at all our camps, and he was there doing our highlight tapes. He was basically the guy who took over the college recruiting process, right? And there's this push to be able to say as a high school coach, I got so and so signed to this school. There's a genuine there's a genuine desire for a black high school, particularly young black high school coaches, to say that. And not to say that white coaches don't have the same thing, but again, as a white, most of the white coaches, their families in it and stuff like that. You're talking about a sport that's predominantly played by young African American men. So if you're a young African American coach, you don't lose that level of anxiety to know, hey, I got into this thing, I love this thing, or I'm involved with this game because of everything that I lived through as a player, not because I had a daddy who coached or a brother who coached or anything like that. I dived into this thing as a player. So you still have those feelings as a player that doesn't go anywhere just because you take the pads off. You still have the mentality. I still have that mentality that I had as a player. Look, I got to get it done. I got to get stuff done. I got to get stuff going. I mean, today I'm recording this on a Sunday, and I had a ton of shit to do, but still in my mind, I had to get this recording done just like, in my mind, I had to sit at that signing day table in high school. Again, the mentality and the urgency doesn't go away just because you take the pads off, right? So, but anyway, his first year, and I coached underneath him his first year when he was at Blake High School. I remember him telling the boys that Blake at that time, we had 6 guys going off to college. We went 0-10. 0-10. We lost every single game. All right, officially 0-10. We actually won 2 games, but those 2 games we had to forfeit because we had a kid that was late to school that day. So we went 0-10, lost every game. And we still had 6 guys going to college. Here was the issue with that. It was a very misleading thing in which he said, because of the 6 guys that year, again, we're 0-10, so we're not that good. Right? We don't have a lot of players that are going to be good enough to play at the collegiate level. So of the 6 guys that he was referring to, all of them were like Division III schools and schools that pretty much take anyone, programs that are not just pro. I believe one was like Shippensburg, and I remember talking to the player that committed to Shippensburg, and he was gone after this first year. A lot like it was at Carson Newman, where these are programs that are pretty much just taking anybody. And again, yes, you as a high school coach, you can say you got 6 kids signed or 6 kids going to college, 6 kids going to college, but at the end of the day, we know that these kids are not really going to be lasting at that particular school. This particular school that they go into isn't much. There isn't much excitement, and those programs pretty much just take anybody. And this is something, again, I learned as a college scout, is there's a lot of programs out there that actually do just take anybody, because there's the haves and the have-nots when it comes to college football. It's just the way it is. Again, these are things I dive into and transfer in D1. But anyway, he's able to say that because it makes him look like he's the coach that can get you signed. And not that he isn't a coach that can get you signed, but the thing that needs to be communicated to the players and to the families is, you got to be good enough. You got to be good enough. There's no coach out there that is going to have the connections that's going to make up for the fact that if you're not good enough, you're not getting a scholarship. You're not getting offered if you're not good enough. All right. And final point here, I'll close you out, because this is what I learned. This is the real issue. This is the real kind of the thing that'll make you really understand everything I'm talking about here, and why it's important for us to do away with the draft, do away with all this hype that we give National Signing Day, stop making it a circus, and just let the boys figure out what school it is going to fit them the best. All right. So there was a time I was around 24, 25 years old, about 10 years ago now, right? And I was attempting to start my own semi-pro football team. I was going to name it the Ocean City Sharks. And this is out in Ocean City, Maryland, right in the Eastern Shore area and stuff like that. And there's a college out there named the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And they had everything I needed. They had the facilities, they had the football field, they had the college campus, they had everything I would need to make this the home base, make it basically the home base for the Ocean City Sharks idea. There was a club football team, right? So the University of Maryland Eastern Shore had a club football team, and they didn't compete in the NCAA. They didn't have to deal with any of the NCAA rules and all that kind of stuff. So if a kid was to go to that school, they wouldn't have had to sit out they wouldn't have to sit out a year to transfer. They wouldn't have to do anything but go to the school and be able to go to whatever school it is they decide to. Now, obviously, it's not a big deal now, seeing that we have the transfer portal. But back then, before the transfer portal, it would have been a great opportunity for kids who didn't have the academics or didn't have the grades to get into, like a kid like me, who was in my situation, didn't have the grades to get into the school that they wanted to get into out of high school. They could have went to University of Maryland Eastern Shore for one semester, and they would have been able to transfer to whatever school it is that they wanted to go to, because the University of Maryland Eastern Shore is not a junior college, and it's an actual university. It's one of the universities of basically University of Maryland, just on a different campus. So it's an actual university that is an HBCU. It's a predominantly Black school. And they had a club team, and they pretty much would have let anybody come in, being at a university, and they wouldn't have to go 2 years or whatever, right? So I remember at the time, the guy who was running the program, his name is Bryant Mitchell. Shout out to Bryant if you're listening. But I remember at the time I introduced myself to him, and I ran up on him. He was in the middle of class, actually. And I remember I was talking about the idea of putting the Ocean City Sharks team together out there in the Eastern Shore. I believe it was Princess Anne, Maryland area or whatever. And he broke down the entire situation. He broke down the situation, which, a kid could come to the school just for the one semester and then end up transferring to whatever school it is they want to go to. And if they stay another semester, they can go wherever they want, and they can go in there academically, just off the academics, because the University of Maryland Eastern Shore is an actual university. It's not, community college X, this, that, and the third, where if a kid goes to a JUCO, they're going to have to go at least 2 years there. This is, like I said, this is before the transfer portal. They were going to have to go at least 2 years there and then maybe sit out a year or whatever. There were going to be all these sort of things with the NCAA. With the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, you'd be getting in as a student, and then as you can compete on the field because it was a club team. So it could have easily been a feeder for whatever school you wanted to go to, right? So he was by himself with this whole thing. So he was doing everything in his power to spread the word about this university's program and get kids to commit or whatever. But again, he was older guy. He was only one guy, and he really didn't have the infrastructure to do that, right? So I was helping him out for a little bit. I said, all right, cool. Since I'm trying to build this team in Ocean City, in fact, he offered me an opportunity to coach at at UMES. I was like, all right, cool. I'll try to help you. I'll see what I can do with the idea that I have with the Ocean City Sharks. And for a while, like after I had that conversation with him, I would go to certain high school coaches and I'd say, hey, if you have any kids that are thinking about JUCO or whatever, you can come to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore and you can do whatever it is you're trying to do. And I remember approaching one coach, and this was the typical kind of a Black coach who just wanted to say that certain kids are committed here and committed there. I got this one signed there. I got this one signed there. And he tells me, I remember I told him the same idea that I just told you in terms of getting a kid to go to UMES only for a semester and they're able to go wherever they want. Told him the same idea. And then his response to me was, oh, yeah, well, I already got a kid. He's committed to a JUCO. And I remember going back to Brian and reporting what that high school coach had said to me. And he goes, yeah, exactly. What the hell does that mean? Committed to a JUCO. Makes no sense. It made absolutely no sense to to have a kid commit to a JUCO when you have this situation in which they're going to be actually getting a full credits, full university credits, and playing club football outside the NCAA. They're going to get film and all that, and they can get into whatever school they want to get into with their grades. And it made more sense for them to go to UMES versus go into a JUCO. But again, you had that high school coach in the way, not spreading the information, not telling them, hey, forget about this JUCO idea. Let's go to UMES, get your credits right, develop as a student, and then, obviously the football stuff will take care of itself. And again, I'm just telling you what I know. All right, telling you the stuff I've actually lived through myself. This is what signing day has done. This is what the circus of the NFL draft. This is part of the ripple effect that the NFL draft has, where people are now doing things just for their ego, just so they can say they got this one here. Or if you're, again, even myself, I put myself in this category. You're just doing it so you can sit at that table, so you can get your pictures, and you can, be a part of that recognition of, all right, I actually achieved this and accomplished this. Again, nothing wrong with wanting to actually accomplish these things, but hey, you got to live with the consequences. All right. So these are the things that I discussed. And if you have not yet, make sure you register for when this will be coming out on a Monday. So if you have not come or registered or been a part of the live streams that I host every single Sunday at 11 a.m., in which we just talk about how we can help how we can help guide young kids when it comes to the transfer portal, how this NIL stuff, how we can work with kids when it comes to the NIL stuff, and get some clarity on what your next steps need to be. Make sure you do so. Everything is available. It's a one-stop shop on makeyourmove.com. That's MakeYamove.com. You'll see a button there that says D1 transfer and has all the information there for you. All right. Fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.